Thank you very much. It's a great honor and pleasure to be given the opportunity to speak to you. So thank you all for coming, and of course, special thanks to the Science, Philosophy, and Religion Foundation for their kindness, for their heartwarming kindness, actually, and hospitality. I'm going to speak about, as you can see, Quranic meta-ethics and the necessary conditions of moral judgment. So it is more about ethics and morality, not really about meta-ethics or existence of God. My presentation is kind of divided to three parts. In the first part, I will be talking about what are the two main meta-ethical theories in the Islamic tradition. That is important because then I will argue that the meta-ethics of the Quran, or the teachings, the general ethos of the Quran, supports one of them rather than the other. And I will finish by arguing that in the Islamic tradition, we can build upon some works of the scholars who were engaged in kalam in order to argue for an objective morality which is not moral realism and is not divine command theory. So I will be arguing for the possibility of objective morality without realism and without commands. So let me start, and I will mainly be reading. You can only see the title here. In Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, ethical or theological voluntarism was inspired by the notion of an all-powerful God in control of everything. According to this theory, moral values are established by God, and if He willed, He could have changed them. This theory was articulated by theologians in different religious traditions who centered divine omnipotence, absolute free will, and sovereignty. While the other theory, which I like to call common sense theory of morality, and sometimes it is a kind of natural law theory, was inspired by the notion of an all-good God, all good, whose commands reiterate what is already established in people's minds. According to this theory, human beings are created by God with an inborn ability to distinguish between good and bad, right and wrong. It was articulated by theologians in different religious traditions who centered divine benevolence, wisdom, and justice. A few words about what is meant by meta-ethics. Indeed, meta-ethics is the study of the origin and the meaning of ethical concepts and terms. And meta-ethics, indeed, is that field of ethics that is concerned with questions such as, are moral standards culturally relative? Are there moral facts? If there are moral facts, what are their origin or nature? Meta-ethical theories, if we are talking about Western tradition, for example, they include theories such as emotivism, ethical relativism, naturalism, and so on. But since we are going to focus on the Islamic traditions, indeed, questions that belong to meta-ethics are mainly discussed in the works of kalam, which I like to translate, as many others, to philosophical theology. The earliest practitioners of kalam articulated theories that were closer to common sense morality or a kind of natural law theory. Those are usually considered to belong to the Mu'tazilite school of philosophical theology in Islam. The late practitioners of Kalam, or the later ones who came after 11th, 12th century, articulated theories that are closer to ethical voluntarism, or what is also known as divine command theories. They identify with the Ash'arite school of Kalam, which prevails in Sunni Islam. However, it is worth mentioning that Sunni Muslim scholars from across the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali schools of law upheld a common sense meta-ethics, as mentioned by the famous Ibn Taymiyyah, among others. The ontological status of moral values and the epistemic basis of morality were discussed in the history of Arab Islamic thought under the heading of the issue of good and evil. In Arabic, مسألة الحسن والقبح. The question, as formulated by early scholars, was whether al-shara', which can be translated to divine law, establishes or merely indicates morality. In Arabic, al-shara' muthabbat am mubayyan. Of course, there is no clear Quranic answer that would support any of the rival positions traditionally adopted by the Mu'tazila and the Ash'ari. However, the Quranic ethos, as I will show, clearly supports the objective basis of morality, which is like the common sense theory. In support of the objective status of moral values in the Quran, it is important to notice that the Quran used pre-existing language in revealing the divine message. It used the particular concepts with their specific meanings and connotations. It addressed many ethical terms to pagans, such as adl, justice, dhulm, transgression, khair, goodness, shar, evil. Therefore, it used ethical terms in a way that people could understand. If good and evil deeds mentioned in verse, such as Quran 1690, surely Allah enjoins the doing of justice and the doing of good to others, and the giving of kindred, and He forbids indecency and evil and rebellion. He admonishes you that you may be mindful. If this verse meant only obedience to commands, the whole sentence would be pointless and have no meaning. Among the most common terms in the Quran used for virtuous acts is al-ma'ruf. Literally, ma'ruf means what is known, the known. And although this term appears 32 times in the Quran, the commentators did not feel a need to explain it because it is taken for granted. Well, it is worth noting that the implication of the word ma'ruf as an ethical term is that the right thing is known to us. Such verses support the view that the values and the duties promoted in the Quran were well known to some people before Islam, and this implies that divine commands expressed in the Quran are not arbitrary commands, but righteous ones, appealing to human ethical knowledge or human ethical common sense. Thus, one can maintain with someone like Khalid Abul Fadl, whom I often like to cite, and others, that the Quran often uses terms such as dhulm, justice, zulm, injustice, adl, justice, or salih, the good, in an objective fashion, as if they are ontological realities, independent and objective. Well, indeed, most ordinary Muslims would accept a simple answer regarding the question of what is the judgment of certain action. They might simply seek to know whether it is permitted, halal, or prohibited, haram. Yet many would find it legitimate to ask further, why is it halal or why is it haram? Such legitimate inquiry will definitely lead to the grounding of moral or ethical legal judgments in value judgments. So something would be halal because it is good, haram because it is bad. Grounding moral judgments, right and wrong, or ethical legal judgments, obligatory, permissible, recommended, prohibited, and discouraged, in value judgment, good and evil, hasan and qabih, is what truly distinguishes a moral epistemology that is based on reason. Therefore, an action or behavior would be considered wrong and prohibited because it is evil, not evil because it is prohibited. However, it must be mentioned that this does not contradict the belief that qabih and haram designate actually the same action. God explicitly states that he has endowed the knowledge of good and evil in human nature. That is in Q91, from 7 to 10. Sorry. He says in the Quran, and the soul and him who made it perfect. Then he inspired it to understand what is right and wrong. ألهمها فجورها وتقواها. He will indeed be successful who purifies it, and he will indeed fail who corrupts it. Here, the knowledge of good and evil is one of the capabilities created in us by God. God has therefore mentioned his knowledge, or this knowledge, as his special bounty to human beings. Another verse, Q90 from 8 to 10, says, have we not given him 2 eyes and a tongue and 2 lips, and pointed out to him the 2 conspicuous ways, وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ? This verse indicates that the ability to distinguish between good and evil is also a blessing from God. Ibn Kathir, a Quranic commentator, in his tafsir, says that it has been reported that the 2 ways, al-najdain, actually mean the good and the evil. This indicates that he guided everyone, believers and unbelievers, because hadaynahu al-najdain, it is hadayna al-insan, the human being, not only the Muslims or only the believers. Good nature and divine inspiration have been described in the Quran as light upon light, nurun ala nur. Hence, divine revelation is not light over darkness, but light upon light. Given this introduction from the Quran and citing these verses in support of common morality, I would like to move to talk about ethics in the Islamic disciplines. Ethics, or moral philosophy, as understood today, has never been a separate domain of inquiry in the traditional Islamic disciplines. Also, classical Islamic disciplines are usually themselves classified according to sectorial affiliations. But, needless to say, ethics and ethical reasoning transcend sectorial affiliations and polemics found in many works of kalam or philosophical theology written in the pre-modern and even in the modern era. Different issues related to ethics. as a discourse with distinct questions have been discussed under different genres of Islamic disciplines, including kalam, philosophical theology, fiqh and usul al-fiqh, law and jurisprudence, tasawwuf, Islamic mysticism, and falsefe, philosophy in the Greek tradition. An engagement with questions of ethics require, I believe, developing theories that connect and build on the ethical views and theories found in different genres of Islamic disciplines just mentioned. And developing and connecting to these theories in light of contemporary notion of justice and developments in the field of moral philosophy.
You have 5 minutes more.
Okay, thank you. An important development in contemporary ethical thought is a set of theories that adopt what is called a constructivist approach to ethics. This approach developed in response to the critiques raised against deontological and consequentialist theories in ethics, and the assumptions that underline these theories, most importantly, absolutism. According to this approach or this theory, there are objective criteria of moral judgments insofar as there are objective criteria about how to reason about practical matters. So, moral judgments can be true or false without representing mind-independent normative facts about the world. Objectivity, not realism, does not require any version of moral realism that would render morality static and absolute. Yet it does require the fulfillment of certain conditions, which, to use the Arabic Islamic terminology, are called by Qadi Abdul Jabbar al-Mu'tazili شروط حسن التكليف, conditions of moral obligations, or a better translation would be presuppositions of normative judgments. And if one finds what moral judgments imply or presuppose, he or she shall be in a position to shoot holes in any moral judgment which implies or presupposes what is false, impossible, or otherwise unacceptable. Necessary conditions, شروط حسن التكليف, articulated by the Muslim scholars of the medieval age, Qadi Abdul Jabbar, can be divided into two. Some that are related to the agent and some that are related to the judgment itself. So those related necessary conditions of normative judgments related to the agent include that he should be qadir, able to act, alim, knowing, living, of course, hayy, and willing, murid. Now, while necessary conditions of normative judgment related to the judgment itself includes, according also to the medieval Qadi Abdul Jabbar al-Mu'tazili, they include purposefulness, rationality, objectivity, yes, impartiality, and universality. Of course, he didn't call it objectivity. That is a term that I used according to my understanding of what he said. However, a moral judgment, in order to be valid, needs to apply to everyone. That is what they said, including the atheists, mulhida, who know the evilness of injustice, although they do not know the divine commands or the commander. Also, to be a rational obligation, taklif aqli, any obligation must conform to the rules of practical reason as developed, I argue, by contemporary philosophers. Well, purposefulness, a moral judgment, must be purposeful and not arbitrary. Thus, if one has no purpose in assigning an obligation, then the assignment of the obligation would be irrational. Impartiality, an action is considered evil for occurring in a certain way, then it must be evil from any agent if it occurs in the same way. Universality. The Quran, as already indicated, emphasizes a core of universal values that are shared by all human beings, such as al-adl, al-ihsan, al-rahma, justice, mercy, compassion. But morality encompasses more, not only the abstract universal values, such as justice and mercy. It also includes codes of practice and rules that determine duties, obligations, and rights. These are constructed by taking into consideration not only the core moral values, but also advancement in psychology, neurology, anthropology, and other fields of knowledge. In addition to that, any judgment, rule, or principle must satisfy rules of practical reason. Rules of practical reason, to summarize very quickly, distinguish the ethical discourse from any other type of discourse. They include treating others the way you want to be treated, that ethical considerations have the priority over any other considerations, of course, consistency, applicability to all individuals without exception, and also that a true rule, in order to be considered a moral rule, should be for the good of all. To conclude, knowing the necessary conditions of moral judgments that draws on Islamic intellectual heritage and contemporary ethical thought provides us with rational tools to expose any judgment which presupposes what is false or fails to satisfy these conditions. All the rules that discriminate against women, for example, are actually constructed and clearly fail to satisfy the conditions of rational obligation. Thus, they should not be considered part of the divinely ordained morality or Sharia, which is, as many have recently argued, first and foremost an ethical paradigm. And thank you.
Doktor Mariam al-Attar hocaya güzel sunumlarından dolayı çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Thank you very much, Doktor Mariam. Şimdi soru cevap faslına geçeceğiz inşallah. Hocamızın sunumu Ahlakın temellerinin kritik bir incelemesi hakkındaydı. Kendisi İslam düşüncesinde bu konuda çok zengin kelam geleneği de dahil olmak üzere yaklaşımların olduğunu açıkladı sunumunda. Konuyla ilgili sorular varsa alabiliriz. Evet, buyurun.
I need my...
Hello. Firstly, thank you for your presentation. I will have two questions. The first is I am curious about how you see the Quran's morality understanding in means of grounding it. Does it see are we able to ground morality only by God, or is there other ways than to form our moral understanding, like using our reason? This is my first question. What is the Quran's moral aspect on that? The second is, can we construct a moral hierarchy by using like how Quran conveys the moral messages, it means of like starting from the more important like moral principles and going from like the lower levels. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, but I can't see you, so can you raise? Okay, thank you. So for the first question, which talks about moral foundations and what the Quran sees as the moral foundation, actually, you know, like the Quran is not a book in philosophy, so it inspires us and guides us, and definitely if we want to develop Islamic ethics or a moral theory that is Islamic, we should take into consideration the moral teachings of the Quran. But I think that the moral terms that I mentioned that we can find in the Quran and some general moral principles, they are not invented. They are not only established, or people did not learn them when they were first revealed.
Could you please speak in the microphone?
Those moral principles and values that are mentioned in the Quran and certain things that are commanded in the Quran, the Quran assumes humans' knowledge of those. Humans' understanding of what is ihsan, what is adl, what is birr, what is taqwa. So I think that the foundations of morality, if we are trying maybe to establish a kind of Islamic ethical theories, we might try to ground morality in the universal common sense understanding of humans, because this common sense understanding of morality is also embedded in human beings who are created in God. But there are people who are trying also to ground morality in divine names, in the beautiful names of God, or simply in the Quranic ethical terms. So there are possibilities, of course, for different ethical theories, different Islamic ethical theories to be developed.
But as I understood, you said the Quran expects us to have an understanding first. So it just doesn't...
Yeah, I believe, and like many others, that of course the Quran assumes that you have reason.
Yeah.
It assumes that you understand because it is revealed in a pre-existing language, and the assumption is that people understand what is said in the Quran. So if it says يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ, if that simply means he commands whatever he commands, then this is something that we cannot make sense of. When you talked about moral hierarchy, I know that there are some very serious scholars of the Quran who are arguing and trying to come up with this moral hierarchy. Some argue that taqwa comes first, some argue that birr comes first, some would say maybe salah. So I have no preference of that, because moral values, they are all, I think, in the same level, and we apply them according to the context, according to the situation. That answers the question?
Well, the reason I was asking the second question is because according to our moral understanding, it shapes our personal lives and it shapes a society. So I believe there should be a hierarchy, and I just wondered how the Quran's moral approach is to it, or does it like emphasize certain things more as it like should be the primary moral understanding, or certain things secondary? So I was just trying to understand.
Okay, I understand. So you're talking now like what should come first, like the personal morality or the social morality? Is it more about social justice, or is it personal piety?
Yeah.
Well, definitely the Quran deals with both aspects of human life. Of course, personal morality is very important, and also social justice is important. But you know, I think that like in the present time, there are many preachers and many people who focus on personal morality. I have the feeling that we need scholars who elaborate ethical theories that are more related to social justice and to morality and to politics of the societies as well. If I said
Yeah.
it right, yes.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank you.
Welcome.
Evet. Bir soru daha alabiliriz. Son bir soru daha alabiliriz. Buyurun. Hocam oradan hemen mikrofonun oradan bir soru sor. Size de verelim. Buyurun.
Öncelikle bu konferansı düzenleyenlere ve hocamıza sunumundan
Bir saniye kulaklığını alsın. Evet buyurun.
Öncelikle bu konferansı düzenleyenlere ve hocamıza sunumundan ötürü teşekkür ederim. Ben metaetik açısından ve İslam dini açısından kürtaj olgusuna nasıl baktığını, nasıl değerlendirdiğini merak ediyorum. Richard'ın bu konuda bir makalesini okumuştum ama kendisinin de kürtaj olgusuna ve metaetik çerçevesinde, İslam dini çerçevesinde nasıl baktığını merak ediyorum. Siz nasıl yorumlarsınız? Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much for the question, actually, which does not really relate to the topic of this presentation, because when we talk about abortion, this is part of practical ethics. So it is my presentation was about meta-ethics, which is kind of to be distinguished from normative ethics and practical ethics. And when it comes to the question of abortion, this is a very difficult question, and many scholars throughout the history have dealt with this. Some people would, as far as I know, some people would allow abortion at a certain stage before the soul is formed in the body. But like when the soul is formed in the body, that is a disagreement between the scholars, and definitely that the modern science has to be taken into consideration when deciding when the human being is actually formed in the womb. But as I told you, I am not very much into that. Maybe there are many books that are written on this issue actually, which comes under bioethics.
Teşekkür ediyoruz soru ve cevap için. Buradan da bir soru sormak isteyenler var. Mikrofonu getirebilirsiniz. Ön tarafta. Evet, buyurun.
Öncelikle teşekkür ediyorum tebliğiniz için. İslam düşüncesinde Mutezile'nin husun ve kubuh teorisi var malumunuz. Acaba husun ve kubuh, yani İslam düşüncesinde, geleneksel İslam düşüncesinde diğer kelam ekollerinin de, Mutezile'nin de savunduğu meta ahlak teorileri bugünkü tartışmalarda acaba güncellenebilir mi? Yani küresel iklim değişikliğinden sosyal adaletsizliğe, pratik ahlak ve meta ahlak tartışmaları var günümüzde de felsefi alanda. Klasik İslam düşüncesindeki husun kubuh tartışması gibi tartışmalar bugün acaba disiplinler arası bir güncellemeye tabi tutulabilir mi? Teşekkür ederim.
Well, I'm not aware of any
He is asking about Doctor. Maybe I can clarify the question.
I got it.
Okay,
I got it.
perfect.
Thank you. But I'm just saying that I'm not aware of any contemporary discussion that use the terms husn and qubuh when actually discussing like global warming or important issues related to ethics today. Actually, I can see that there are more thinkers who are using terms that are derived from Western moral philosophy when discussing these issues. But there are attempts also to relate that to the Islamic tradition, of course. And they can be updated. Of course, they should be updated. And I argued in my article that we need to come up with theories, whether in meta-ethics, normative ethics, or even practical ethics, of course, that are based in our own tradition. But that doesn't mean not taking into account developments that are happening elsewhere in the world, in the field of moral philosophy, or of course in science as well. Yes, thank you.